Sonoma Sideshow.
All right, welcome to Sonoma Sideshow. Recorded at Grim Reaper Studios, located somewhere at the base of the beautiful Blue Mountains in eastern Oregon. I'm your host, Les the Snowman Kinney. Tonight's guest is Bill Murphy. Bill grew up in eastern Oregon, later graduated with his bachelor's from Western Montana, his master's from Montana State University. Professionally, he's been a high school history teacher for about 23 years in the great state of Montana. When he's not spending time with his family and taking care of his little ranch, he's coaching and officiating youth sports. Bill spent 18 years competing in the sport of rodeo and even had a brief stint as a bullfighter. So we look forward to talking to him about that. And he's also a leatherman, leather craftsman, so we hope to talk to him about that also. So please welcome to the show one of my oldest compadres, Billy Jack Murphy. Bill, welcome to the show.
Grubby, thanks for having me, buddy.
Hey, this is going to be fun. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I kind of mentioned to you before when I'm interviewing people, there's something in their history that I find interesting and that I want to share, and that's kind of the interviews I'm looking for. And with you, right off the bat, I'm like, man, this guy rodeoed for a long time and lived that cowboy lifestyle. And I have friends. I have a diverse group of friends, and so in my mind, it's kind of cool that different people can kind of hear other people's stories and see where they're coming from. So with that in my mind, how I would want to start this is, and this is going to sound like an ignorant question, but for those people that wouldn't know, your lifestyle, how does one get into being a cowboy and eventually getting into competing, in the rodeo? So how does that happen?
So, grew up in agricultural farm ranch environment. Yeah. Dad fought bulls and rode broncs, and so you gotta if you emulate those people, then you follow along. And I started fighting bulls when I was 18, and really wanted to ride broncs, but Dad kept saying, nope, you ain't ready. And I kind of slipped in behind his back. He got me in to where I was fighting bulls for Colorado State University's rodeo practices, so I was getting some live action practice. And then kind of went behind his back because he kept saying, no, you ain't ready to ride broncs, and they had a rodeo at the barn at CSU that was not a college rodeo, and I talked to the stock contractor, Jerome Robinson, and I was like, hey, Jerome, have you got any turnouts? Can I get on one? And he was like, yeah, you sure can. And I got bucked off so quick that I think they had to ask me to move so that they could close the gate. So
oh, God.
It was bad. It was bad, and Dad chewed my ass and my butt, excuse me. And so then it went from there. And that spring, I won $1. I don't know how much I won, but I saved my first $1 and kind of took off from there. And
what year was that?
Oh goodness, 92,
that's
93, 92. And I fell in with some good people. Mm-hmm. That were at my stage of the game who had the same hunger.
Yeah.
And, we just went from there. And I fell in with a really good guy, one of my great friends of all time. You're my greatest friend of all time, but
Please.
Well, yeah. One of my great friends, and he was hungrier than I was, and he just said, we're going to go, and we're going to go get our pro cards, and we're going to go. And he had a 1979 Honda Civic, and I bought a 1980 Honda Civic. They were both gold colored, and the one I bought was 180 or 150 bucks, and it cost me 310 to license it. And
Yeah.
we drove them all over the western half of the U.S.
Well, how does it work, like, organizationally for people? You know, I mean, I understand playing minor ball and baseball and, or, you know, leagues and districts and all that. How does that work with rodeo? How do you compete?
So when you're ready to jump into the bigs, you just basically say, I'm ready to jump in, and you have to buy your permit through the PRCA, Pro Rodeo Cowboys Association, and you buy your permit, and you have to win however much money they've set at that time. You know, it might be 1,000, it might be 1,500, whatever they've determined, to where you can actually be a full-fledged card-carrying member. And so the bad part is, they say you're a permit holder, so you can only enter these rodeos, you know. And so that kind of limits you. And so some guys struggle, and some guys bang it out, and you know, in a weekend, and they've got it done. It took me a year, and then I was a card carrying member.
Excellent.
I still remember my first dollar. There's a guy from Nevada, Ed Dufarina, and I'd like to find this guy somewhere, somehow. And he was like, you just won third place. If you'd have done this one thing, you'd have been first place.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, okay. And so I really took that to heart. And yeah, so if you're a guy just walking off the street, you can just say, I'm going to buy my pro card or buy my permit. Okay. As long as you pay your dues, then you're in.
Right.
And then you just got to prove yourself from there.
Yeah. Interesting.
So
yeah. And I know this is going to probably be terribly difficult to answer, but in the time that you were doing that, how many Broncs do you think you've ridden?
I don't know. You know, because there was, like I said, there was about 18 years in there.
Yeah.
Between fighting bulls to pay for entry fees, or fighting bulls for a stock contractor, and then he would pay my fees as my wage for fighting bulls. You know, it's about between 18 and 20, and some of those years were short-lived, you know, due to injury or whatever. Yeah. But I couldn't even fathom a guess.
That's interesting.
My wife gets mad at me because she's like, "What did we have for supper last night?"
Right.
I don't know. What horse did you get on in 1995 at this town?
Do you remember your best score, though? Like, I mean, I nailed it on this one. I'll never forget that, you know.
Yeah. I was 87 one time at Ennis, Montana. And it was a horse that went on to the NFR several years in a row. Probably my favorite ever. I got on a horse, number 83, Blue Northern, in Billings, Montana, on the day that my third daughter was born, which makes me sound like a horrible person because I went to a rodeo, but I went to a rodeo because my wife told me it would be cheaper to go to the rodeo rather than to turn out of the rodeo
Right.
3 hours after she had a kid. So,
nice. Right. Okay.
yeah.
Well, what's it like though? I mean, before the kids and everything, what you started to kind of get into that, and with the little Honda there, what's it like for a 20-something traveling around trying to hit all these rodeos? What's that culture like? That lifestyle?
Debauchery and filth. And a lot of rodeo guys are raised from really good families, so they understand manners and how you treat other people. But you get out there and it's nuts.
Yeah.
I remember one time my buddy grabbed me from work on a Thursday, and I had to be to work the next day, Friday. And he said, and we were in Cheyenne, and he said, we're up in Prineville tomorrow, Prineville, Oregon. And I said, have you looked at a map? And he's like, oh, yeah, I think we can make it. So we're somewhere in Central Oregon, and I called my boss at a saddle shop I was working at from a truck stop on a payphone back in the days before we didn't have phones. And I said, I'm sick. And he heard a Jake brake from a truck going by this payphone right out by the right out by the road, And he said, you're sick, huh? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm not feeling real good. And I mean, we had 2 or 3 rodeos we went to, from Cheyenne to Central Oregon to coming back. It was, I mean, everything about it. If I could look back and do it again, I would just go to more.
I mean, there's probably something kind of I don't know what the right word would be, but that you can romanticize about that lifestyle. A bunch of you loading up in a 4-door Lincoln, traveling, hundreds of miles, drinking cold brew and going out at night afterwards. And I'd imagine that is kind of fun. I mean, it's hard on you, and you couldn't do it now probably, but
no, I could do it one time.
Yeah.
Now, the stories, and it's kind of like, everything about it was amazing. You'd put 4 guys in, and like you say, a big 4-door car. And I had a 88 Lincoln. I had a couple of 80. I had several 88 Mercury Grand Marquis.
Yeah.
And
rode like butter.
Rode like butter, and they're just big land yachts. But you could put 6 guys in one of those cars and all their gear in the trunk. And
split gas.
Usually we were good on the way there, usually. And then on the way back, or way to the next one, it was like, all right. So I bought fuel. We bought beer.
Yeah.
And a lot of illegal stuff, but
well, I mean, we don't need to get into that. Well, what about this now? I know this is probably a long list also, just like trying to remember how many Broncs you think you rode, but about injuries, because I know damn right that, you're not riding in rodeos if you ain't hurt. I mean, somebody's hurt always. So what are some of your injuries you've received over the years?
Gosh, there's some bangs and bumps and bruises, but I blew out an ACL. I jumped off a horse after the whistle and completely destroyed an ACL. I broke an ankle and some bones in my foot twice. Broke my left hand. That was a stupid one.
Say your, hands and knuckles and stuff. look like
Yeah.
you've been bare knuckle fighting for
Back in the day.
Yeah.
So that guy that I went to Oregon with, and Rooster, he actually married, he was the preacher for my wife and I's wedding, but so we lived together in an 8x30 camp trailer for a year. If that ain't a good time, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And he rode bareback horses and I rode broncs, and so we would tease each other about how each other, rode, the sissy event or whatever. So we finally decided to swap.
Oh.
And so there was a rodeo just south of where we lived, and I said, well, I'll enter mine, and then I'll enter yours if you'll enter, both of them as well. So I got on one and won the bareback riding just because I got a decent horse. I didn't know anything about it, but I got on a decent horse, and so I won the bronc riding and the bareback riding, and so I was like, this is easy. So that fall, I started entering the bareback riding in college for the college rodeos, and I thought, this is cake.
Yeah.
Well, I would never get on a practice horse in college because it hurt every single time. It hurt from your hand all the way up to where your neck screws onto your head. So
lovely.
I would never get on a practice horse. Well, this guy brought in a whole bunch of horses that he bought from Jordan, Montana, from up at the Binion horse sale, and he said, I've been trying to get these horses broke, and they ain't getting broke. So he brought in a trailer load of them. Well, I got on a couple of bronc tryouts and whatever, and thought, well, I'm done. Well, all the bareback riders were so played out because they'd got on 3, 4, 5 of these horses
already. Yeah.
So they convinced me, and my hand was swollen up a little bit because it was cold, and I might have banged it on something, I don't know, but my hand was pretty swollen up. And
ice chest.
They got me convinced to get on a bareback practice horse in college. And I remember trying to pull my hand through the rigging, and this kid, he's now in Minnesota, Bow Creek, he put his foot on the rigging and was pulling on my fingers to try to get my fingers through the rigging, and he finally got it done, and I was like, oh, that seems pretty tight. And he goes, that's just the way you want it. God and baby Jesus couldn't get you out of there. And I was like, all right, whatever. And the horse wound up kind of flipping over and broke every one of the flat bones across my hand.
Oh.
So I missed a large part of that college season. And the bad deal was I was fixing to go to the college finals that year, but temporarily paralyzed, ACL, broken bones.
Just a few.
I used to have a couple things. I used to have my wife tape my foot one summer before we had kids, and she was like, well, what do I do? And I was just like, I don't know, just tape it as tight as you can get it so that it doesn't move around in there.
Oh, man. That's crazy. So all those years, and I'm sure that people come and go, and there's some guys that are on top and, of the sport, but who was your biggest influence? Besides your dad or, a family member, but somebody who was competing, who was your biggest influence?
So there's a couple guys that were super cool. Obviously Dad. That that fella I was telling you from Nevada, Ed Dufarina. And he wasn't like somebody that was on my radar, but he was a guy that was, you know, in between 15 and 20 every year for the world. And, you know, if he took time to talk to me, then he was awesome. One guy that I just loved was a guy named Red Limmel from South Dakota. And he was he went to the finals every year, and Red was just a cowboy.
Yeah.
And I remember one time in Oakdale, California, I drove roundabout way, finally make it to Oakdale, California after a week or two of rodeoing. I make it to Oakdale, California, and get on a horse that is named the same name as a town in Montana, just down the road here. So I get on, I believe it's number 50, Big Timber, from Flying U Rodeo, named Big Timber, and I get on that horse, and everything is going really, really well, and I'm fixing to win a prize in Oakdale, California, which is kind of a big one.
Yeah.
You know, it's not Pendleton or Cheyenne, but it's a big one, and kind of a cool one. And I just decided, I guess I'd had enough of riding this horse well and quit lifting on my rein and fell off. And I'm walking back kind of just upset with myself. And Red goes, well, I guess you didn't want to win anything here. You just quit lifting on your rein. And I was like, thank you. Appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
No, he was one of the good ones. Monty Henson, when we were kids, I mean, he was the man.
What about your bullfighting?
You know, I watched a lot of good guys. There was a guy in northern Colorado that kind of took me under his wing that was really, really good. His name's Casey Smith. He was super good. You know, I had all kinds of different influences there.
Yeah.
Most of that was just like trial and error. Like the last time I did that wound up hurting.
Yeah.
So,
So, you know, and this is kind of a wide open question, but all those years traveling around, I know that from stories you've told me, you've met some, what would I say, interesting people along those journeys, you know? And is there anybody that just sticks out? Like, I can think for myself, you know, playing music and all those journeys that I had, and those certain characters that were just, you know, they stand out to this day. Anybody like that you ever just kind of think back on, and could have been an old cowboy or some, you know, somebody at the grocery store?
So there's two guys that I ran with quite a bit that stick out. One's Rooster, the guy that married Tammy and I. And I was his interpreter. He was from Oklahoma, and so I was his interpreter when he got to the real world. We would pull in somewhere to a restaurant or convenience store or whatever. He'd ask for something, and the gal behind the counter would say, "What?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, he needs Copenhagen."
Yeah.
It was, I mean, for a long time I was his interpreter, but and I still keep in good contact with him. He was a blast. Well, you met him down there at Sampson's that one day.
Oh yeah, interesting guy.
Yeah, that was an interesting trip. But and then a guy that I really loved hanging out with was a guy that's quite a bit younger than me. and we traveled for several years together, and we just, we had a lot of fun, and I think we pushed each other to be better, and we each understood, so, some sports people are a little more soft, and some sports people are a little more hardened. But, if I came back and was like, I was 79, I thought I was going to be more than that. And he was really blunt. He'd be like, well, if you wouldn't have missed 2 licks in the middle of it, or if you'd have turned your toes out,
right,
maybe you would have been 83, 84. But, and Wayne was super good. And actually, I get to be in his next wedding.
Nice.
This coming July.
I like how you worded that. That was clever.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
It's kind of a segue here, really, but I have to touch on it, and I've always admired your artistic ability, and one of the things that you've always done that kind of segues into the rodeo world is you've been a leather guy, working leather, tooling leather, making shaps and all kinds of tack and things like that. So I kind of just wanted to touch on that a little bit. Tell me, I know you've been doing it for, 30 years or so, but what got you into that, and how did that kind of intertwine itself into the rodeo culture? Well,
Pilot Rock High School, of all things, gave me a life skill, other than Ed Fisher in the wood shop and however many teachers we had in the metal shop. We had that leather shop, or leather class, and rudimentary at best was what I was kicking out from there. I'm sure Mr. Sherman was probably like, this looks horrible, but
no,
keep trying. Or he probably said it a little more smart aleck and condescending than that, but
I think he did say that to me, but anyway.
Yeah. Learned a little bit from there. I'm not kidding you. I had an idea in my head. This was what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned my bedroom into, so I'm 18, 19. I turned my bedroom into half of a leather shop. And a gal that I was dating at the time borrowed me $750 to buy a sewing machine.
Oh, man.
And I still have the sewing machine, still functional.
Great investment.
Wonderful investment. Yeah. Not so much on her part, but on my part.
Right. That's what matters here.
That's right. It's all about me.
Mm-hmm.
And then, a little bit later on, I got a job at a saddle shop.
That's what I was going to ask you about, too. Yeah, that is so cool, I think.
And I totally lied my way through the interview, air quotes around interview. And I lied my butt off, and got the job. And they were like, why are you so slow when you're on the sewing machine? And I was like, well, I just want to do a really good job.
I'm thorough.
Meaning, I don't know how this sewing machine works.
Yeah. These things are complicated.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts.
Yes. Dangerous.
I got to build a couple of saddles, and I was thinking on the way home this afternoon, those saddles that I made, the owner of this saddle shop he was an entrepreneur, and he didn't really care about quality. He was just like, let's get these done.
Mm-hmm.
And we literally made saddles off of saddle trees. He was bragging about, he was like, these came out of the space shuttle. What?
Oh,
I don't.
no. He was a salesman.
Oh yeah. And instead of putting like an antique on the saddles, you know, where it sets darker down in there, we sprayed dye with like an automotive.
No.
Yes, we did. Yes, like you're gonna paint a car.
Yeah.
We sprayed dye on there. And his favorite color was maroon.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would make these saddles and then spray them maroon.
That's hilarious.
And at the time, I was like, these are the ugliest things I've ever seen.
Yeah. Hey,
yeah.
Let me ask you this, though, and just so people know, I also like to tool leather. It's a hobby, side hobby. But do you ever, because this has happened to me, do you ever, just for a second, take away, you know, lifestyles, everything, do you ever just think to yourself as a human or as a species, you know, we're carving on some animal's skin? You know, just by luck, you know, we're running the planet, and, you know, it works the other way. And I guess it's good because we're trying to use all of, you know, harvest, the whole harvest, but of cows, you know, beef cows. But it's like, sometimes I think, are we really just kind of like that Silence of the Lambs, that guy that was Buffalo, whatever, and he had that lamb? Yeah, I mean, are we just a nice version of that? I don't know. What do you think?
I've never gone Buffalo Bob on it, but I have appreciated the fact that, you know, we're taking something from nature,
yeah,
and upgrading it from there.
Yeah, because I mean, we're going to live off. I mean, the majority of humans, you know, use beef for some manner or another, and so at least we're using everything. You know, I guess I'm trying to look at it the right way, but.
Well,
send all emails to Bill, please, not me.
Yeah, don't tweet me.
Yes.
The bad part for me working leather now, because for a long time all I was doing was, you know, cowboy stuff,
chaps and
yeah, and I'm gonna build, and I built a lot of cool rodeo chaps and chinks and leggings for guys that were working, and headstalls and reins, and that was all fun, because I knew that someday, you know, I'd go to a rodeo or I'd go to a Brandon and I'd see somebody that had some of my stuff, and that, you know, you puff up your chest a little bit, you're like, yeah, but those guys are broke.
Yeah,
they ain't got no money. So the bad deal for me now is I'm taking, you know, some of, as you say, nature's offerings, and I'm making things that people want to hang in their houses, or, you know.
Yeah. What are you working on right now? What's in the shop?
So tomorrow I got to make 2 wine bags so that when you go to the neighbors to have, you know, a bottle of wine.
Yeah. Being social.
Yeah, you got this beautiful wine bag.
Right.
But I was talking to Mom the other day, and we were laughing, and I was like, the good Lord gave me 2 wine holders.
Right.
You know, my right and left hand. And so, but we can be, I guess, privileged enough to where we can say, well, I have a wine bag that's customized with my family brand or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, but then tomorrow I got to go pick up some silver. I got to go, it's going to be like $500 for 2 purses. And they're going to be kind of some knockout purses, both really similar except for some of the accessories. But they're going to be cool. They've got custom silver, custom buckles.
Yeah.
And then my next project is I'm using some, I don't want to say slave labor, but what is it called when they got them when they're held captive? No, that's slave labor.
Yeah. Not a good time for that.
No. I've got some high school kids making the metal parts for me.
Oh, right.
But I'm going to make a hat rack, and it's going to be a cross, and it's going to be about a 4-foot tall cross and about a 3-foot wide cross with metal hat holders, kind of U-shaped hat holders.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna cover the cross in hair-on brindle cowhide, and it sounds bad because that's not a necessity, but that's a $400
piece of
piece
art
that I could. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No,
Yeah,
I get it.
It's
Totally.
It's gonna be pretty cool, I think. I don't know. I got away from doing cowboy stuff just because cowboys are broke.
Yeah. Well, hey man, I admire you. I admire the fact that you are an athlete and you've been able to do all those things that you did on the road, and I think you're a hell of an artist, and I love your, I have some of your leather work that I keep up and just look at and kind of use to help guide me when I'm dinking around in the shop. So, no, man, you're super talented, and I don't know how. I'm sure you hear that, but I'm just letting you know that.
No, thanks, Grubby. I love looking at every picture of all the stuff that you've made and sent me, and I love looking at the pictures.
Right on.
You were the guy that sat in the back of class when you're supposed to be taking notes and had the most accurate drawing of anybody in our class ever.
Oh boy, that's
with or without acne.
Whole nother podcast. That's the thing. Will you? I'm gonna have you come back on sometime. You do that, won't you?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, I mean, we can go down another rabbit hole, whatever,
Maybe then we can talk about how not to be a jerk in high school. Yeah,
because one of the two of us really, but let's not point fingers. No. Hey, I always ask everybody at the end, I'm like, my grandfather used to always. We are. Our time's just about up. I've got a few more minutes here. I know. That's why I got to have you back on. But my grandpa always used to say, "Spit wisdom, boy." And so, I always ask everybody this question: if you had one chance to go back in time and give advice or spit some wisdom to one person, and it could be yourself or somebody historically. Anybody, but you just had this one opportunity to go back and say something, who would it be and what would you say?
It's going to be a blanket policy, and don't be an a-hole.
Yeah.
And that goes to me included. Okay. And if there's people that we went to school with that hear this, they'll be like, well, I wish he'd have taken his own advice, however many years ago.
Yeah.
Don't be a butthole.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Me and you don't understand what somebody had to go through in their day,
right,
to get to where we had an interaction with them.
Yeah.
Don't be a butthole.
Right on. I like it. I try to live by that every day, and I try to teach that to my kids. I have failed more than I've succeeded, but anyways.
Well,
Well,
Yeah.
listen, man, I really appreciate you coming on. You're one of my besties of all time. You're just an amazing person. I love you, and I thank you for spending a little bit of time with me this evening, and I'll definitely have you back on. And, yeah, thank you, Bill.
Love you, Pard. Let's do it again.
All right, man. I will
And
talk to you
this-
soon.
The same back to you.
All right.
You're the brother I never had. I love you, partner.
All right. Peace.
Peace.
Okay, I want to thank tonight's guest, Billy Jack Murphy. Thank my listeners, my sponsors, Bill Murphy Roofing, Wandering Wizard Concepts, Vertical Jigs and Lures, DLC Photography, The Shop, Diesel Fuel Filter Kits.com, History Hunters and Firearm Antiquities, and of course, the John P. Salter Foundation. All sponsors can be found online and on most major social media outlets. Intro music provided by Pecan Pie and distributed by Upbeat. News articles, when I do read the news, and I plan to get back to that, are provided by Reuters and Associated Press. That's a wrap, folks. Be sure to catch the next episode. Until then, keep your nose clean if it takes both sleeves. And say nice things about me, because I am gone.
You had no right.
Well, I'm your doctor, baby. Let me give you what you need. Well, I'm your doctor, baby. Let me give you what you need.